Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Danae Hanford. This is the Flashback Friday show, where we recap the high-level lessons learned from the Tough Decisions guests from the current week. And now, your hosts, Dan and Danae.
Thank you for joining us on Flashback Friday. Fridays are the day that Dan and I review the podcast interviews that we've had from the previous week, kind of try to give you the biggest takeaways from each of those interviews and pique a little curiosity so that you can go back and pick the ones that most interest you. So Dan, if we start with Monday this week, we talked to Cathys Fettke on Monday, and I know that she was an interview that I really enjoyed.
Yes, Cathys Fettke, she was going to be on episode number 32 this week. And so if you missed her episode, be sure to go back and check it out. We're also today going to be talking about Ben Lovro, which is going to be episode 33, Chris Prefontaine, episode 34, and Jay Campbell, episode 35. So diving a little bit into some of the things that we went over with Cathys Fettke on episode 32, Danae. One of the things I liked about her, she had a great energy about her. She kind of started to talk about this tough decision that didn't go so well for her.
Kathy had she was a lot of fun to talk to, and she did have a lot of energy about her, and it was not hard to see why she had been successful as she is. One of the big tough decisions that she talked to us about was one of the initial investments that she was involved with when she first got into the multifamily syndication market. She partnered up with, I guess, a syndicator. And as a result of the investment, she came to realize that he was not the most trustworthy person that she should have partnered with. And she didn't know all these details before. So it was kind of one of those things where she got into it out of just really not knowing all the details. But as a result of that, she and some of her investors lost some money. Now, it wasn't as much as they could have lost, but they definitely didn't make any money on that deal. They lost some money.
And I asked her about this deal very specifically, Danae, if you remember. I asked her, I said, how much money did you actually lose on this? I can't remember the actual numbers, but thankfully in this deal, her investors in this deal did lose some money, but I think they only lost about 20% of their initial investment, if I'm not correct.
Yeah, that's the percentage that sticks out in my mind, was 20%. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been. That being said, anytime you go into an investment and you lose money, that's definitely not the outcome that you're looking for. What I really took away from her, though, was the way she dealt with that. And I think that's what she wanted us to come away with, too, is how she got through that. And she was able to, or she did basically make those hard phone calls, that we've talked about before. She had those hard conversations with her investors and was very transparent with them about what was going on with the deal. And the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, is that many of those investors still work with her today. So obviously she did a good job coming through that and pulling through that in a way that maintained, her trustworthiness, because it wasn't really anything that she did wrong. But it was more a lesson that she learned about how, to be very careful on the people that you partner with and do deals with.
So if you want to find out how she actually did that, be sure to go listen to Cathys' episode, which was episode 32. And that way you can kind of find out some of the tips and strategies that she used to, save those investors and not lose those investors. Because many of those investors that lost money on that deal to this day are still investing with Cathys and on other deals. And so she dives into some of the things that she did to mitigate the issues and the errors that had happened during that deal. And of course, as you know, she's obviously not doing business with that other gentleman anymore. So the next episode was episode 33. And this was Ben Lovro. And Ben Lovro has a very unique story. And I would encourage everybody to listen to his episode. He actually was serving time behind bars because he was running a business that most of us should never be running. But nobody should ever be running. He actually was a drug dealing business. He had a drug dealing business when he was in, I believe it was New Mexico, which is where he was. And he had to serve time behind bars because of an incident that occurred during one of his business deals gone wrong. And so he served time behind bars. And while he was behind bars is where he really transformed his life and really, turned his life over to Christ and found his new way in this world. And so he talks about the struggles that he had prior to being behind bars and what kind of decisions he had to make while he was behind bars and how now he's really transformed his life and is really, when he first got out of jail, he moved to South Carolina to be closer to some of his family. and he went in to work as a waiter in a local business here in South Carolina, and then has since left that job and is now full-time in real estate, and he's full-time and being able to help other people make a better life for themselves and to become a servant in many different areas. So he's a very unique person. He has a very unique story, and he is now, in this serial entrepreneur space and is really laying some heavy groundwork for some things to really kind of spark his future. So I would really encourage you to listen to that episode 33.
Episode 34, we had Chris Prefontaine on with us. And a couple of things about Chris that I really, really enjoyed talking to him about was, number one, he is in business with his 2 children, which I found very unique. And he talked about how, since they were little, he's been developing these skills and leadership qualities in them, and how it was sort of just an obvious next step that after he had put so much time and energy, as we all do with our kids, but after he put all that into them, then, now that they should just come on as partners with him in the business. And one of the things that he really wanted to emphasize was how he's learned that it's really important to be a mentor, but also to use a mentor to help with decisions, because we all need someone to bounce our ideas off and talk through things. Chris and his family, they invest in real estate, but they have a very unique model where they invest without over leveraging themselves. And like a lot of us, they have that model as a result of some roadblocks or some struggles that they had previously with the previous model they were using. So really a good idea to check out episode 34 to kind of find out exactly the model that Chris and his family use in their business. They also have a real estate investing training platform called Smart Real Estate. And that's basically where they take their trainees, if you will, and show them exactly how to do what they're doing. And it was neat to talk to him because you could tell he has a passion for people that want to be able to do this, to be able to do it. And their model really allows anybody that has an interest, if they choose to be able to do that.
Well, and one of the things that I think that, you'd already touched on was, family being in the business with him. And the unique thing about it is, you sometimes will see business owners and entrepreneurs that have, their siblings or their children in the business. And what's unique about this family and Chris's family, Chris Prefontaine's family, is that not only does he have his children in the business, but his children's spouses are in the business as well, which was the unique piece.
Yeah, so they all work, and I think they actually, if I remember correctly, they all live really close together as well. So they're kind of all intertwined every day. And he does talk in the episode too about some of the things that they do to keep that work life in balance.
Yeah, we actually asked him, because that's the biggest thing with working with family is how do you, be able to separate that time with, spending time with family versus working on the business all the time. And when you work in it together, how do you do that, And so he was able to dive in that episode on some of the strategies and some of the things that, his family does to make sure that as they do work together, that they continue to enjoy working together and they can help more people, especially through their real estate coaching platform that they've created as well.
Yeah, and then episode 35, we interviewed Jay Campbell. He is a marketing and advertising strategist. So what do you remember about his interview?
I think the biggest takeaway from his interview was how he was able to transform by thinking outside of the box with his wife's real estate business. She had a real estate business that was fairly successful. I mean, they were doing probably like 5 or 6 closings a month, something like that, around 5 or 6 closings a month. And they went from doing about 30 closings a year to about, I think he said like 300.
Well, I think that's the number that sticks in my mind. So I think it's around 300.
And the biggest thing that they did is that he came from a different background and had the ability to think outside of the box, to be able to put some outside of the box marketing strategies in place in that business that nobody else in that industry was doing, to be able to really impact his wife's business. And so they were able to work together to be able to work through growing that business together.
Yeah, Jay was a good resource to talk to, and he does talk about coming into a business that he was not familiar with, but the teamwork between he and his wife was really a good thing. The other thing that I took away from him was the lesson that he learned about the bottom line. When he came into that business, he was trying to help her create more profit, and so he I don't want to say forced, but he really encouraged her to drop some of the expenses that she was having. And one of the things that he saw as a superfluous expense was the coaching and training programs that she was involved in. And so
which at the time wasn't making any money, which is why he cut it.
Right, exactly. He saw that as an expense without any kind of return. So he said, well, if we're going to increase the bottom line, we need to cut these expenses. But he was very honest and open, saying that he really learned that was something that his wife needed, and she benefited from those, and those made her a better business person. And so I guess what we learned from him through that is what he said is that just because it doesn't directly affect the bottom line doesn't mean that it's an extraneous expense or something that needs to be gotten rid of.
Exactly. So, if you have a passion that's not a very profitable passion, which some of us do, it's okay to sometimes lose money on those things as long as you're not losing money on the entire business, as long as the bottom line is still positive, even after having that passion business involved. I think sometimes we as entrepreneurs need to have that kind of an outlet. It really helps us.
Well, so much of what we do as entrepreneurs is driven by our energy and our passion. So if it's missing, then that can be a strain on the business for sure.
And I think that's what he found out as they progressed in this business together, is that now that they're making really good money and doing really well and, closing on 300 properties a year, they have a lot more, cash available. And so he was able to really spark more of their passion by now they're doing some coaching together and they're starting to really, drive really well together, and they're starting to add those things back. And, they're now looking at those things as separate entities too, to be able to increase the bottom line in those as well.
Yeah, so we had a really great week this week on the podcast, 4 really good interviews and a lot to be learned. So check those out. Again, just to recap, it was Cathys Fettke on episode 32.
Ben Lovro on episode 33.
Right. And then Chris Prefontaine was episode 34 and Jay Campbell on episode 35.
Yeah. So please take some time to go back and listen to those episodes if you've missed them. And if you want to look at the other Flashback Fridays, see if there's any other episodes that might, fit well with you, I would encourage you to do that. And thank you so much for being with us this week. Look forward to continuing to be a part of everything. If you need some show notes, you want to get some links to some of the resources, feel free to visit our website at toughdecisions.net.
Make sure to subscribe to our Tough Decisions podcast channel to listen in on Saturday and Sunday for our 2 specialty shows to help you make better decisions. The Step Up Your Game with Dan show will air on Saturdays, followed by the Survive and Thrive with Danae show on Sundays. Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us spread the word about the Tough Decisions podcast with your friends, and also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, Facebook, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to the Tough Decisions Show.